At my husband's funeral, another woman cried louder than me. She wailed and collapsed dramatically at the front of the church, throwing herself over Thabo's casket while I sat frozen in the front row, my hand clutched in my daughter's. I had been married to Thabo Okafor for 23 years, yet this stranger mourned him with more passion than I could summon. Through my veil of shock, I watched this woman, beautiful, younger, dressed in expensive clothes I could never afford on my teacher's salary, claim my grief as if it were her right. When she looked at me, there was no shame in her eyes, only a strange triumph that sent ice through my veins. "My poor Thabo," she wept loudly enough for everyone to hear. "My poor, sweet Thabo. My Thabo." The words echoed in my head like a death knell. The funeral director approached nervously, unsure who to comfort, the legal wife sitting quietly, or the mistress causing a scene. My son Samuel, home from university, stood up with a dangerous look in his eyes, but I held him back. "Not here," I whispered. "Not today." In that moment, I realized our family bank accounts, which had been mysteriously depleted over the past 5 years, might have funded this woman's designer dress and the diamond pendant that hung around her neck. The twin of one Thabo had given me for our 20th anniversary, claiming it was one of a kind. That night, after the mourners left and the casseroles stopped coming, I found a key in Thabo's suit jacket, a key to a safety deposit box I'd never known existed. Something told me this was just the first of many secrets my husband had taken to his grave. Or thought he had. If you're listening to my story, please subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications. This is a story of betrayal and rebirth that took me to the darkest places I've ever been, but also showed me strength I never knew I had. Before the funeral, before the other woman, before everything fell apart, I thought I knew what my life was. My name is Amara Okafor, a 47-year-old high school mathematics teacher in Johannesburg, South Africa. For 23 years, I had been married to Thabo, an investment banker whose career had taken us from our humble beginnings in a small township to a comfortable home in one of the city's better neighborhoods. We had built what I believed was a good life. Our daughter Zinhle, 21, was studying medicine at Wits University, and our son Samuel, 19, was pursuing engineering at UCT. I had put my own dreams of earning a PhD on hold to support Thabo's career and raise our children. I taught mathematics at the same public school for 18 years, finding purpose in helping children from backgrounds similar to my own. Thabo and I met at university. I was studying mathematics. He was in finance. He was charismatic, ambitious, and attentive. We married young, just 2 years after graduation. Our wedding wasn't lavish, but it was beautiful. 200 guests. Traditional customs blended with modern celebration. My father beaming proudly as he walked me down the aisle in a dress my mother had spent months saving for. In those early years, we struggled financially, but were happy. Thabo worked long hours while I taught and cared for our babies. We saved every rand, living in a modest 2-bedroom apartment, until Thabo received his first major promotion when the children were in primary school. The move to our house in Parkhurst was a dream come true. 4 bedrooms, a garden for the children, good schools nearby. I remembered how Thabo and I had stood in the empty living room, holding hands and marveling that this beautiful space belonged to us. "We've made it," he had whispered. "This is just the beginning." For a while it seemed he was right. Thabo's career continued to advance. He traveled more frequently: Kenya, Nigeria, London, New York. He brought home beautiful gifts: a silk scarf from Paris, a handcrafted bracelet from Lagos, a designer purse from Milan. I displayed them proudly, evidence of our success, of how far we had come from the township. My classroom walls were covered with photographs: our family at Victoria Falls, at Samuel's graduation, at Zinle's university acceptance celebration. I bragged about my husband to my colleagues, about his important clients and international conferences. I believed we were living proof that with hard work and dedication, the future we dreamed of could become reality. Our home was the gathering place for family celebrations: Christmas dinners for 30, birthday parties, graduation festivities. My mother, before she passed 4 years ago, would sit in our kitchen watching me prepare food and say, "Amara, you have been blessed." I believed her. But the truth was, our marriage had begun changing years earlier. Thabo's absences grew longer and more frequent. When home, he was often distracted, his mind elsewhere. I told myself it was work pressure, the responsibility of providing for our family. I didn't question when he began keeping his phone locked, when calls would come late at night that he would take in his study behind closed doors. Our intimacy faded gradually, like a photograph left too long in the sun. Occasional nights of passion became rare, then almost non-existent. I blamed myself, my body changing with age, the demands of teaching and household management leaving me too tired. I bought new lingerie that remained in the drawer, unworn. I scheduled romantic dinners where Thabo would arrive late, distracted by work emails. I didn't recognize it then, but financial warning signs had been appearing. Thabo became secretive about money, setting up separate accounts I had no access to. Large withdrawals from our joint account would appear with vague explanations: investment opportunity, work expenses, retirement planning. I trusted him completely, never questioning these transactions despite my own conservative approach to money. After all, finance was his expertise, not mine. The year before his death, we had argued more frequently. I wanted to renovate our aging kitchen. Thabo insisted we couldn't afford it despite his executive salary. I wanted to plan a trip to celebrate our 25th anniversary. He claimed work was too busy. When I suggested marriage counseling, he dismissed the idea as unnecessary. "We're fine, Amara," he'd said. "Every marriage goes through phases. This is just a busy time." I had believed him. Or perhaps I had forced myself to believe. After all, we had our beautiful home, our successful children, our respected positions in the community. From the outside, the Okafor family was a portrait of Black excellence and achievement. The morning of the day Thabo died, I had kissed him goodbye as he left for a business trip to Durban. It was a quick, perfunctory kiss, the kind long-married couples exchange without thinking. I had no way of knowing it would be our last. The call came at 2:17 p.m. A heart attack, they said. He had collapsed at a restaurant. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was gone. I remembered standing in my classroom, my students staring as the phone slipped from my hand and clattered to the floor. The principal drove me to the hospital, where I identified my husband's body, his expression peaceful as if he were sleeping. The days that followed passed in a blur of arrangements, phone calls, and visitors. Colleagues brought food. Friends offered help. The children flew home, shell-shocked and grieving. In the midst of this fog, I didn't notice certain friends of Thabo's avoiding my eyes, didn't register the hushed conversations that stopped when I entered the room. I was prepared for grief. I was prepared for loneliness. I was prepared for the administrative nightmare of death, certificates and insurance claims. What I wasn't prepared for was the woman in the black designer dress who would shatter the foundation of everything I thought I knew about my life. The first hint that something was deeply wrong came the day before the funeral. I was sitting at our dining room table with the funeral director, finalizing details for the service, when Thabo's colleague Michael arrived. Michael had been Thabo's friend for 15 years, their families often celebrating holidays together. His wife Lorado had brought a casserole the previous day, though she'd stayed only briefly, avoiding eye contact. Michael seemed uncomfortable, shifting his weight from foot to foot as he offered condolences. When the funeral director stepped away to take a call, Michael leaned forward. "Amara, I need to tell you something before tomorrow," he said, his voice low. "I've been struggling with whether I should say anything, but you deserve to know." My heart stuttered. "Know what?" "There might be someone else at the funeral tomorrow. A woman named Grace, a colleague?" I asked, though I already knew the answer from the way he wouldn't meet my eyes. "Not exactly." He hesitated. "Thabo has been seeing her for about 5 years. I'm sorry, Amara. I thought you should hear it from a friend before you're blindsided. 5 years. The words hit me like a physical blow. "Does everyone know?" I whispered. Michael's silence was answer enough. "She's planning to come to the funeral?" I asked, my voice hollow. "Yes. And Amara, she believes she has certain rights. Thabo told her things." "What things?" "That he was planning to leave you. That they were going to marry." I laughed then. A terrible sound that made Michael flinch. After 23 years. After I put him through his MBA. After I raised his children. "I'm so sorry," Michael repeated. "I should have told you. We all should have." After he left, I sat alone at the dining table, the house quiet around me. 5 years, more than 20% of our marriage. While I taught other people's children and kept our home and dreamed of reconnecting once ours were grown, my husband had built another life. I thought of the business trips that ran long, the missed family dinners, the distracted conversations. I thought of the times I'd tried to rekindle our passion, only to be gently rebuffed. I thought of the weekend conferences and late-night work emergencies. I went to our bedroom and opened Thabo's closet. His suits hung neatly, organized by color as I had always kept them. I ran my hands over the expensive fabrics, breathing in his familiar scent. In the back of the closet, I found a small suitcase I didn't recognize. Sleek, expensive leather, unlike our usual practical luggage. Inside were clothes I had never seen. Designer shirts with tags still attached, silk ties I hadn't chosen, cologne I had never smelled on him. At the bottom was a velvet jewelry box containing platinum cufflinks with the initials T&G entwined. T&G. Thabo and Grace. My hands trembled as I replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. Something cold and hard settled in the pit of my stomach. I walked to our ensuite bathroom and methodically emptied the contents of my stomach, then washed my face with cold water. In the mirror, a stranger stared back at me. A woman with hollow eyes and ashen skin. A woman who had been living a lie for 5 years without knowing it. I thought of all the times I'd shown Thabo's photo proudly to my colleagues, bragging about his latest achievement. Had they known? Had they pitied me? When Samuel and Zinle returned from making arrangements at the church, I said nothing about Michael's visit or the suitcase. How could I burden my children with this knowledge when they were already grieving their father? Instead, I hugged them tightly, breathing in the sense of the babies they once were, now adults facing their first major loss. That night, I lay awake in our king-size bed, the empty space beside me yawning like an abyss. I stared at the ceiling fan slowly turning above me, the same fan that had witnessed thousands of nights of our marriage. Had he laid beside me thinking of her? Had he made love to me while imagining her? 5 years of deception. 5 years of my life given to a marriage that had become a charade. And tomorrow, I would face the other woman at my husband's funeral. As dawn broke, I made a decision. I would not cause a scene. I would not collapse or wail or tear my clothes. I would stand tall and dignified, the grieving widow receiving condolences. If this Grace wanted a spectacle, she would not get one from me. I had my children to consider, my reputation, the life I would somehow need to rebuild from these ashes. I opened the closet and removed the black dress I had purchased for the funeral. It was elegant but conservative, befitting a high school teacher and respectable widow. I laid it on the bed beside a simple pearl necklace Thabo had given me for our 10th anniversary, before the lies began. Whatever happened at the funeral, I would not break. I would not give anyone, especially not this Grace, the satisfaction of seeing me crumble. Little did I know that the funeral would be just the beginning of the unraveling of the life I thought I knew. The funeral. Service was to begin at 10 a.m. at the church where we had attended services for over 15 years. I arrived early with Samuel and Zinle, accepting condolences from church members who had watched our children grow up, colleagues who had worked with both Thabo and me, neighbors who had shared our community. I sat in the front row, my children beside me as the church filled behind us. I didn't turn to look, but I could feel the weight of eyes on my back, hear the murmurs as people entered. Samuel held my hand tightly, his young face set in grim determination. "Mom," he whispered. "Are you okay?" I nodded, not trusting my voice. Zinle sat stoically on my other side, her medical training perhaps giving her a different perspective on death, though nothing prepares you for losing a parent. The minister began with prayers, and then Thabo's brother Thomas gave a eulogy filled with childhood memories and professional achievements. Friends spoke of Thabo's generosity, his business acumen, his devotion to family. Each word felt like a knife, knowing now the double life he had led. It was during the final hymn, as we prepared to move to the graveside, that I heard it. A keening wail from the back of the church, followed by the sound of someone rushing down the center aisle. Before I could turn, a woman in a black designer dress pushed past me and threw herself over the closed casket at the front of the church. "My Thabo," she cried, her voice carrying throughout the church. My love, how can I live without you? The congregation fell silent, hundreds of eyes darting between the woman draped over the casket and me, still seated in the front row. I felt Samuel tense beside me, ready to rise, but I gripped his hand tighter, holding him in place. The woman, Grace I presumed, was beautiful in a calculated way. Her dress, though black for mourning, was fitted to showcase her curves. Diamonds glittered at her ears and throat, catching the light from the church's stained glass windows. She was perhaps 10 years younger than me, her skin flawless, her hair styled in an expensive weave that I could never have afforded on my teacher's salary. "Madam," the minister said gently, approaching her, "please, this is a time of respect." "I respected him," she shouted, turning to face the congregation. "I loved him for 5 years while she neglected him." She pointed directly at me, her perfectly manicured finger in accusation. A collective gasp rose from the mourners. I felt Zinnel stiffen beside me, heard her sharp intake of breath. Samuel half rose, but I pulled him back down. "Not here," I whispered. "Not now, but Mom—" "Let her make a spectacle of herself," I said quietly. "We will not." Grace continued her performance, tears streaming down her face, smearing expensive makeup. He was leaving her for me. We were going to be married. He promised me. The funeral. Director and one of Thabo's cousins finally approached, gently guiding her away from the casket, though she continued to sob dramatically. They led her to a seat in the back of the church, where she sat surrounded by people I didn't recognize. Her friends or family, I assumed, come to support her claim on my husband. The service continued, though the atmosphere had irreparably changed. The secret was now public. I could feel the pitying glances, hear the whispered conversations. My humiliation was complete. When we moved to the graveside, Grace kept her distance but remained visible, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, accepting condolences from those who approached her. To my shock and growing anger, some of our mutual friends, people who had dined at my table, whose children had played with mine, went to her after paying respects to me. As Thabo's casket was lowered into the ground, I threw the customary handful of soil, murmuring a final goodbye to the man I had loved, the man I now realized I had never truly known. The reception afterward was held at our home. I had debated canceling it after Michael's revelation, but tradition and propriety demanded I fulfill my role as grieving widow. I stood in my living room, accepting condolences, and watching as friends and family ate the food I had spent days preparing. "Mrs. Okafor," a voice said behind me. I turned to find a man in an expensive suit, someone I didn't recognize from church or Thabo's workplace. "My condolences on your loss." "Thank you," I said automatically. "I'm sorry, have we met?" "No." He handed me a business card. "I'm Richard Mokoena, Mr. Okafor's personal attorney." I frowned, turning the card over in my hand. "Thabo's attorney is James Nkosi. He's been handling our affairs for 15 years. Richard smiled thinly. "Mr. Nkosi handles your family matters, yes. I handle Mr. Okafor's personal business. When you have a moment, we need to discuss some urgent matters. Perhaps tomorrow at my office? Say, 10 a.m.? Before I could respond, he melted back into the crowd, leaving me staring at his card. Personal business. The implication sent a chill down my spine. Later that evening, after the last mourners had left and the children had gone to bed exhausted, I went to Thabo's study. I had avoided it since his death, the space feeling too intimately his. Now, I turned on the light and really looked at the room. The heavy desk, the bookshelves filled with financial texts, the credenza where he kept important documents. I tried the credenza drawers, but they were locked. Thabo's keys were in a dish in our bedroom, where I had placed them after collecting his personal effects from the hospital. I retrieved them and returned to the study, trying each key until I found the one that fit. Inside were folders neatly labeled: taxes, investments, property. I began going through them systematically, my teacher's organization serving me well, even in crisis. Most contained what I expected: statements from our known accounts, mortgage documents for our home, life insurance policies. Then I found a folder labeled simply G. Inside were receipts for jewelry, designer clothing, airline tickets to exotic locations I had never visited. There were photographs of Thabo with Grace on a beach, on a yacht, at expensive restaurants. In one, they stood before a small house I didn't recognize, his arm around her waist, both beaming at the camera. My hands trembled as I reached the bottom of the folder, where I found a document that made my blood run cold, a real estate deed for a property in Sandton, one of Johannesburg's most exclusive suburbs. The deed listed the owners as Thabo Okafor and Grace Dlamini. I sat back in Thabo's leather chair, the implications washing over me. Not only had my husband been unfaithful, but he had purchased property with his mistress, property that likely represented a significant portion of what should have been our marital assets, our children's inheritance. Further investigation of the credenza revealed more shocking discoveries. Bank statements showing regular transfers to accounts I didn't recognize, credit card statements for cards I didn't know existed, with charges for hotels, restaurants, and boutiques far beyond what our supposed budget could afford. Most disturbing was a safety deposit box key taped to the inside of the final drawer, with a bank name unfamiliar to me. What else had Thabo been hiding? What other secrets would I uncover? As I sat surrounded by evidence of my husband's betrayal, something shifted inside me. The shock and grief began to crystallize into something harder, colder, more focused. This was no longer just about infidelity or humiliation. This was about my financial future, my children's security, my very survival. I gathered the most important documents, including the safety deposit box key, and placed them in a folder of my own. Tomorrow, after meeting with Richard Mokoena, I would visit this bank. I would learn exactly what my husband had hidden from me, and then I would decide how to proceed. For 23 years, I had been Thabo Okafor's devoted wife, supporting his dreams while setting mine aside. Now I would become something else entirely, a woman fighting for what was rightfully hers. The game had changed, and so had I. The morning after the funeral, I dressed with purpose. A tailored black pantsuit I normally reserved for parent-teacher, conferences, pearl earrings, subtle makeup to hide the evidence of a sleepless night. I needed to project confidence I didn't feel. "Where are you going, Mom?" Zinle asked as I came downstairs, concern etched on her young face. "I have some meetings about your father's affairs," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Just administrative details. Do you want me to come with you?" Samuel offered, looking older than his 19 years in his grief. "No. Take care of your sister. I'll be back this afternoon." I hadn't told them about Grace's claim on their father, about the property in Sandton, about the separate attorney. They were already processing the shock of their father's sudden death. The betrayal could wait until I had more information. Richard Mokoena's office was in a gleaming high-rise in the financial district, the kind of place where Thabo had worked. The receptionist showed me into a conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Mr. Mokoena entered shortly after, accompanied by a younger associate who carried several files. "Mrs. Okafor, thank you for coming," he said formally. "This is my associate, Ms. Beloyi." "Why am I here, Mr. Mokoena?" I asked directly, dispensing with pleasantries. "And why have I never heard of you if you're my husband's attorney?" He sat across from me, folding his hands on the polished table. "I represent certain aspects of Mr. Okafor's estate planning and personal interests. I understand yesterday was difficult." "You mean when my husband's mistress threw herself over his casket at our church?" "Yes, I would call that difficult." He had the grace to look uncomfortable. "I'm aware of Ms. Dlamini's emotional display. Unfortunately, that complicates matters." "What matters?" Mr. Mokoena opened one of the files. "Mrs. Okafor, I regret to inform you that approximately 3 years ago, your husband made significant changes to his estate planning. Changes I never knew about or consented to," I stated flatly. "South Africa doesn't require spousal consent for all financial decisions," he replied, his tone professional but not unkind. Mr. Okafor established several accounts and investments separate from your marital assets. And let me guess, he left them to Grace Delamini. Some assets, yes. Ms. Delamini is the beneficiary of certain accounts and investments totaling approximately R3.7 million. I managed to keep my expression neutral, despite the shock. R3.7 million, nearly $200,000 USD, a fortune that could have secured my future, paid for home repairs, funded my retirement. What about the property in Santon? I asked. He looked surprised that I knew about it. The house is jointly owned. With Mr. Okafor's death, Ms. Delamini now owns it outright. And what exactly am I left with? Your marital home, which is fully paid for. The family car, joint accounts totaling approximately R750,000, and a life insurance policy of R1 million. Less than a third of what he had given Grace. I took a deep breath, centering myself. Mr. Mokoena, was my husband planning to divorce me? He hesitated. I cannot disclose private conversations with my client. That's answer enough. Tell me, did my husband consider what would happen to his children in all this planning? Did he consider that I put my career on hold to raise them while he built his? That I'm 47 years old with limited earning potential compared to what he was making? Mrs. Okafor, I have one more question. These arrangements, are they final or can they be challenged? Ms. Baloy spoke for the first time. There are potentially grounds for challenge under South African law, particularly regarding the marital property regime and whether assets were improperly diverted from the marriage. Mr. Mokoena shot her a warning look, but she continued. If you can prove that Mr. Okafor used marital assets to fund these separate accounts, or the Santon property, you may have a case. Thank you for your honesty. Ms. Baloy, I said, rising from my chair. Mr. Mokoena, you'll be hearing from my attorney. As I turned to leave, he called after me. Mrs. Okafor, Ms. Delamini intends to file claims immediately. I would advise you to act quickly. From Mokoena's office, I went directly to Thabo's bank, clutching the safety deposit box key I had found. The bank manager recognized me. We had banked there throughout our marriage, though apparently Thabo had kept secrets even here. Mrs. Okafor, my condolences, he said, leading me to the vault area. I understand you wish to access Mr. Okafor's safety deposit box. Yes, I have the key. He hesitated. I should inform you that this particular box was opened only 3 years ago, separate from your joint box. Another secret. I understand. He led me to a private room and brought the metal box, leaving me alone after unlocking it with my key and his master key. Inside, I found more evidence of the double life Thabo had led. There were additional property documents, a vacation home on the coast I'd never heard of, investment certificates, and a small velvet box containing a diamond ring far more expensive than my own wedding set. But most shocking was an envelope containing birth certificates for 2 children, a boy aged 4 and a girl aged 2. The father listed was Thabo Okafor. The mother was Grace Delamini. My husband had not just been unfaithful. He had started another family. I sat there, staring at the birth certificates, the names of these children, Thabo Jr. and Amale Okafor, burning into my vision. My hands shook as I realized the full extent of the betrayal. While I had been teaching high school students, keeping our home, sending our children to university, my husband had been building a parallel life complete with a younger woman and replacement children. There was a second envelope, this one containing a handwritten letter addressed to me. I recognized Thabo's handwriting instantly. Amara, if you are reading this, I am gone, and the truth has emerged in ways I didn't intend. I know no apology can suffice for my betrayal, but I want you to understand that it was never about you. We built a good life, raised wonderful children, but over time, I changed, wanted different things. Grace came into my life when I felt most alone and restless. What began as a mistake became something I couldn't walk away from, especially after our children were born. I kept delaying the inevitable conversation with you, telling myself I needed to secure everyone's future first. I have provided for you as best I could while acknowledging my obligations to Grace and our children. The house is yours, and there is enough money for you to live comfortably if not extravagantly. I am a coward for writing this letter instead of facing you. For that, and for the pain I know I've caused, I am truly sorry. Thabo, a coward indeed. I carefully placed everything back in the box except for the birth certificates and letter, which I added to my growing file of evidence. Then I went directly to the office of Diana Naidu, a divorce attorney a colleague had used. Ms. Naidu listened intently as I laid out the situation, the public humiliation at the funeral, the separate attorney, the hidden assets, and finally, the other children. This is among the more complex cases I've encountered, she said when I finished, but not unprecedented. South African law offers some protections for you, especially given the length of your marriage and the evidence that marital assets were diverted. What can we do? We file immediately to freeze all assets pending investigation. We demand full financial disclosure. We counter any claims Ms. Dlamini makes, and we build a case that your husband fraudulently transferred marital property. What about the children? His other children? They are legally entitled to support from their father's estate, regardless of the circumstances of their birth. But that doesn't mean Ms. Dlamini should benefit disproportionately as their guardian. How much will this cost? I asked, suddenly remembering the practicalities. I'm a teacher, and most of our liquid assets are apparently gone. We can work on contingency, she said. I'll take a percentage of what we recover. But Mrs. Okafor, you should prepare yourself. This will be ugly. Ms. Dlamini has already shown she's willing to create public scenes. This will likely get worse before it gets better. I nodded, a new resolve hardening within me. I've already been humiliated in front of my entire community. What's a little more if it means securing my children's inheritance and my future? As I left Ms. Naidu's office, my phone rang. An unknown number. Mrs. Okafor? A woman's voice asked when I answered. Yes? This is Grace Dlamini. I think it's time we talked, don't you? My heart raced, but I kept my voice steady. I agree. Where and when? The cafe at the Santon City Mall tomorrow at 10 a.m. I'll be there. I hung up, my mind racing. What could this woman possibly want to say to me? What more could she take? That evening, I sat my children down in our living room. The time for protecting them from the truth had passed. There's something I need to tell you about your father, I began, my voice steady despite the pain in my heart, something I've learned since his death. I told them everything, about Grace, about the financial arrangements, about the house in Santon. I hesitated only when it came to their half-siblings. There's more, I finally said. Your father and Ms. Dlamini have children together, a 4-year-old boy and a 2-year-old girl. Samuel shot to his feet, his face contorted with rage. Are you serious? He had another family? All those business trips. Samuel, please, Zinhil said, tears streaming down her face. This isn't helping, Mom. It's okay, I said, though nothing was okay. You both have every right to your anger, your grief, your confusion. I'm feeling all of those things too. What are you going to do? Zinhil asked. Fight, I said simply. Fight for what's rightfully ours, for what your father built with me before he was distracted. And I need your support because this won't be easy or quick. They moved to sit on either side of me on the sofa, my adult children becoming my protectors in that moment. We held each other, grieving not just for Thabo's death, but for the death of what we had believed our family to be. The next morning, I dressed carefully for my meeting with Grace. A simple but elegant dress, minimal jewelry, hair pulled back neatly. I would not allow her to see me as a frumpy, aging wife who had somehow deserved betrayal. The cafe at Santon City was crowded with morning shoppers. I spotted Grace immediately at a corner table, looking immaculate in a designer outfit that probably cost 3 months of my salary. As I approached, I noticed a stroller beside her table with a sleeping toddler inside, Thabo's daughter. Mrs. Okafor, she said, not rising. Thank you for coming, Ms. Dlamini, I replied, taking the seat across from her. You wanted to talk. She studied me with calculated interest. You're exactly as Thabo described you, dignified, composed, the perfect maternal figure. Is that supposed to be a compliment? An observation. She sipped her coffee. I wanted to meet privately, away from lawyers and scenes, to see if we might find a civilized resolution. A resolution to what? You've already taken my husband. Significant assets that should have been part of our marital property. and apparently produced children he never told me about. She glanced at the sleeping child. Amale is his daughter too, as is Thabo Jr., who's at preschool. They deserve their father's legacy just as much as your children. My children are adults who knew their father their entire lives. Yours barely knew him. That's not their fault, is it? She countered. Nor is it mine that Thabo fell in love with me. I laughed bitterly. Love? Is that what you call it when a man buys your affection with money stolen from his family? When he lies to everyone in his life? Grace leaned forward. Let me be direct, Amara. I have the legal documents showing Thabo's intentions. I have years of evidence of our relationship. I have his children. You can fight and drag this through the courts, creating a public spectacle, humiliating yourself and your children further. Or we can come to an arrangement privately. What kind of arrangement? I asked, keeping my voice controlled despite my rising anger. You keep the house in Parkhurst and R1 million from the life insurance. I keep the Santon property, the coastal house, and the remaining investments. We each raise our children without interference from the other. Clean, simple, dignified, I studied her face. Beautiful, calculating, confident. She clearly believed she had the upper hand. And if I refuse, then I'll have no choice but to pursue everything legally. I'll testify about how Thabo was unhappy for years, how he stayed with you out of obligation while building a real life with me. I'll bring witnesses, his colleagues, friends who knew the truth. It will be messy and painful for everyone, especially your children. The toddler stirred in her stroller, her eyes fluttering open. Looking at her was like seeing Thabo reborn. She had his eyes, his full lips. For a moment, my heart constricted with an emotion I couldn't name. This innocent child was my children's sister, whether I liked it or not. One more question before I give you my answer, I said. Did you know about me from the beginning? Grace hesitated, then nodded. Yes, Thabo was honest about being married. But you pursued him anyway. He pursued me, she corrected. And yes, I accepted his attention. I was 28, ambitious, tired of struggling. He offered me a better life, promised me everything would be resolved eventually. And you believed him. I loved him, she said, a flicker of genuine emotion crossing her face. Despite everything, I loved him. I stood up, gathering my purse. I'll consider your proposal and discuss it with my attorney. But know this. I've been underestimated my entire life, Ms. Dlamini. By my parents who thought I'd never finish university. By colleagues who saw only a quiet teacher. By Thabo, who clearly thought I would accept whatever scraps he left me. I suggest you don't make the same mistake. Without waiting for her response, I walked away, my head held high despite the trembling in my legs. Only when I reached my car did I allow the tears to come, hot and angry, streaking my makeup. That evening, I sat at our dining room table with a notebook, meticulously listing everything I knew about Thabo's finances based on the documents I had found. 23 years of marriage had taught me his patterns, his habits, the way he structured his affairs. If there were more secrets, I would find them. The doorbell rang just after 8 p.m. I opened it to find Michael, Thabo's colleague who had warned me before the funeral. Amara, he said, his expression troubled. May I come in? I hesitated, remembering how he and others had known about Grace for years without telling me. But I needed allies, needed information. I stepped aside to let him enter. I heard about the meeting with Grace today, he said, once we were seated in the living room. Word travels fast. She called me afterward, wanted to know if I thought you would accept her offer. And what did you tell her? That I didn't know. He leaned forward. Amara, I came to bring you something. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a flash drive. 3 years ago, Thabo asked me to keep this for him. He said if anything ever happened to him, I should give it to you, not Grace. I took it, turning it over in my hand. What's on it? I don't know. He never told me, and I never looked. After Michael left, I went to Thabo's home office and plugged the flash drive into his computer. It contained a single password-protected file named Contingency. I tried various passwords, our wedding date, the children's birthdays, his mother's name. Nothing worked. I sat back, frustrated, trying to think like Thabo. What password would he use for something meant only for me? On a hunch, I typed the date we first met, at a university mathematics competition where I had outperformed him. The file opened. Inside was a detailed document outlining all of Thabo's financial accounts. Every bank, every investment, every property. Most I already knew about from my own investigation, but there were others I hadn't discovered. The document included account numbers, online banking credentials, contact information for financial advisors. At the end was a brief note, Amara. If you're reading this, I've either told you everything or I'm gone. Either way, you deserve the full truth. Despite my failures as a husband, I never intended to leave you destitute. This information will give you access to everything. Thabo, I scrolled back through the document, noting discrepancies with what Richard Mokoena had told me. According to Thabo's own records, there were additional accounts holding nearly R5 million that Mokoena hadn't mentioned. Had the attorney lied to me, or had Thabo kept secrets even from him? The next day, I met with Diana Naidu, bringing the flash drive and printouts of everything I had discovered. This changes our strategy, she said after reviewing the information. If these additional accounts exist and weren't disclosed by Mokoena, we have evidence of attempted fraud. What's our next step? We file for an emergency injunction freezing all assets pending full disclosure. We demand forensic accounting to trace every rand that left your marital accounts. And we counter Grace's inevitable claims with this evidence that Thabo intended to provide for you. Will it be enough? It's a strong start, Diana said. But Amara, we need to be realistic. South African courts can be unpredictable in these cases. We're dealing with a deceased man's estate, children born outside the marriage, and complex financial arrangements. This could take months, even years to fully resolve. I thought of Grace's offer. The house, R1 million, a clean break. It would be easier, faster, less painful for everyone, but it would also mean accepting less than half of what was rightfully mine, allowing Thabo and Grace's deception to succeed even after his death. I don't care how long it takes, I said. I want what's fair for me and my children, Diana smiled. That's what I wanted to hear. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. You made a mistake refusing my offer. Now we do this the hard way. I stared at the message, a cold determination settling over me. If Grace wanted war, she would get one. The next weeks brought a whirlwind of legal filings, financial investigations, and escalating tensions. Diana filed for the emergency injunction, which was granted by the court. All assets associated with Thabo's name were frozen pending further investigation, including the accounts in Grace's name and the Santon property. Grace retaliated immediately, filing her own legal motions claiming entitlement to Thabo's estate as his common-law spouse and the mother of his minor children. She gave interviews to local newspapers, painting herself as the true love of Thabo's life, unfairly denied by an embittered wife who refused to accept reality. I maintained my dignity, refusing to engage in public mudslinging despite the humiliation of seeing my private pain splashed across newspaper headlines. Banking executive's double life exposed after death. Widow and mistress battle over millions in court. Teacher wife claims banker. Husband stole marital assets for secret family. Colleagues at school treated me with careful kindness. Students whispered behind my back. Church members offered support tinged with pity. I held my head high, continuing to teach my mathematics classes, maintaining routines that anchored me amid the chaos. The forensic accountants Diana hired began uncovering the full extent of Thabo's financial web. The picture that emerged was more complex than I had imagined. For the first 15 years of our marriage, all finances had been joint and transparent. Then, 5 years ago, just before his relationship with Grace began, he had started diverting funds to separate accounts. Gradually at first, then more aggressively. He was systematically moving marital assets, Diana explained, spreading financial charts across her desk, sometimes directly to accounts with Grace's name, sometimes through shell companies or investments that eventually benefited her. How much in total? At least R8.5 million over 5 years, plus the Santon property valued at R4.2 million and the coastal house at R3.1 million. Nearly R16 million, close to $1 million. US dollars, siphoned away while I taught high school mathematics, clipping coupons to save on groceries, putting off home repairs because Thabo claimed we needed to economize. We have clear evidence this was marital property, Diana continued. These funds came directly from his salary and bonuses earned during your marriage, not from inheritance or premarital assets. South African law is clear that these should be considered part of the marital estate. What about Grace's claim to be his common-law wife? South Africa does recognize certain domestic partnerships, but the fact that your marriage was never legally dissolved significantly weakens her position. She was aware he was married, which further complicates her claim. As the legal battle intensified, Grace escalated her tactics. She began appearing at places I frequented, the grocery store, the shopping mall, even driving past my school during dismissal time. Always she would have one or both children with her, a visible reminder of Thabo's betrayal. One afternoon, I was leaving a meeting with Diana when I found Grace waiting beside my car, Thabo Jr. holding her hand. The boy was the image of his father at that age. I had seen enough childhood photos of Thabo to recognize the resemblance instantly. "Your lawyers are making things difficult," Grace said without preamble. "That's their job." "Look at him," she said, pushing the boy slightly forward. "He's Thabo's son. Can you really deny him his father's legacy?" I knelt down to the child's level, meeting his confused eyes. "Hello, Thabo Jr., my name is Amara. Are you my daddy's friend?" he asked in a small voice. The question pierced my heart. What was I to this innocent child? Enemy? Rival? Stepmother? "I knew your father for a very long time," I said carefully. "Junior, go sit in the car," Grace instructed. Once he had moved away, she turned back to me. "This isn't just about money anymore, Amara. This is about my children's future, their identity. They've already lost their father. Would you take away their security too?" "I'm not trying to harm your children," I said honestly. "But I won't allow you and Thabo to rob mine of their rightful inheritance either." Then we're at an impasse. So it seems. As she turned to leave, she paused. "You know, he kept your picture on his desk at the Santon house. When I asked why, he said you were the foundation that made his success possible, that without you, he would have been nothing." The revelation stunned me. "Why tell me this now?" "Because despite everything, he respected you, maybe even loved you in his way." She shrugged. "I thought you should know." After she left, I sat in my car, tears streaming down my face. Even now, Thabo's contradictions confounded me. How could he respect me while betraying me? How could he acknowledge my role in his success, while systematically diverting the fruits of that success away from me? That evening, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Okafor?" a woman's voice asked. "My name is Lerato Mbeki. I was Mr. Okafor's executive assistant for 8 years. "Yes, I remember meeting you at company functions," I said. "I've been following the situation in the news. There's something I think you should know." "I'm listening." Mr. Okafor kept a separate email account for his personal affairs. I helped him set it up to keep certain correspondence away from company servers. "I have the password." My pulse quickened. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because what's happening to you isn't right," she said simply. "Mr. Okafor was kind to me, gave me opportunities when others wouldn't. But what he did to you, the way he hid things, I can't stand by anymore." She gave me the email address and password, then hung up without further explanation. I immediately went to Thabo's computer and logged into the account. What I found was devastating. Years of intimate correspondence between Thabo and Grace, financial arrangements, plans for their future. There were emails to Mokoena, instructing him on how to structure assets to minimize Amara's claims in case of divorce, discussions about the best time to make the transition from our marriage to his new life with Grace. Most shocking was an email dated just 3 weeks before his death. "Grace, I've spoken with Mokoena about finalizing everything. The additional transfers are complete. I'll speak with Amara after the children's university break. It's time to end this chapter and begin our life together officially. I know it's been a long wait, but soon we won't have to hide anymore. All my love, Thabo." He had been planning to leave me. After 23 years, after raising our children to adulthood, after I had given him my youth and supported his career, he had been preparing to walk away. The heart attack had merely accelerated a timeline already in motion. I forwarded all the emails to Diana, then sat in the dark of Thabo's study, surrounded by the artifacts of our shared life. Family photos, books we had both read, the desk I had surprised him with on our 15th anniversary. Everything now felt like a prop in an elaborate performance, a marriage that had been real to only one of us. The next morning, Diana called. "These emails change everything," she said, her voice urgent. "They provide clear evidence of intentional diversion of marital assets. More importantly, they show Thabo was planning to divorce you, which means he knew these assets should have been part of a divorce settlement. So what does that mean for us legally? It means we can file for fraudulent transfer of assets, which allows the court to claw back funds even if they've been given to third parties. It means we can potentially invalidate any arrangements made with the intent to deprive you of your share of marital property." For the first time since Thabo's death, I felt a glimmer of hope. The truth was emerging, piece by damning piece. That afternoon, I was surprised by a visit from Thomas, Thabo's older brother who had given the eulogy at the funeral. We had always been close. Thomas had welcomed me into the family when Thabo and I first married, had been a devoted uncle to our children. "Amara," he said, embracing me as I opened the door. "I've been wanting to come, but—" He trailed off. "But you didn't know what to say," I finished for him. "It's all right. I understand." We sat in the living room, the weight of unspoken truths heavy between us. "Did you know?" I finally asked. "About Grace? About the children?" Thomas nodded slowly. "Not from the beginning. I found out about 3 years ago, when Thabo Jr. was born. Thabo asked me to be the boy's godfather." "And you agreed?" "I did," he admitted, shame evident in his voice. "I told myself it wasn't my place to judge, that it was between you and Thabo. I convinced myself he would tell you when the time was right. But he never did. No, and I never pressed him to." Thomas looked me in the eye. "I failed you, Amara. As your brother-in-law, as your friend. I should have insisted he be honest with you, or I should have told you myself." His admission was both painful and healing, confirmation that others had enabled Thabo's deception, but also acknowledgement of the wrong done to me. "Why are you coming forward now?" I asked. "Because I can't stand by while Grace tries to take everything. Because my nephews and niece deserve their father's legacy. And because you deserve the truth. All of it." "What truth don't I know yet, Thomas?" He hesitated. "The coastal property, it wasn't purchased with Thabo's salary or bonuses. It was bought with money from our parents' estate." I stared at him, stunned. When Thabo's parents had died in a car accident 10 years earlier, their modest estate had been divided between Thabo and Thomas. Thabo had told me his share had gone toward our children's university funds. "Are you saying he used his inheritance to buy a house for his mistress instead of our children's education?" "Yes. And there's more. The initial investment in the Santon. Property also came from family money, a business loan from me. Thabo told me it was for an investment property for your retirement. I never knew Grace was involved until much later." This revelation hit me hardest of all. Not only had Thabo diverted marital assets, but he had used family money intended for our children's future to build his secret life. The betrayal extended beyond our marriage to our entire family. "Would you be willing to provide a statement to my attorney?" I asked. "About the inheritance, the loan, what Thabo told you?" "Of course. It's the least I can do." After Thomas left, I called Diana and updated her on this new information. She was cautiously optimistic. "This strengthens our case further," she said. "The court takes particular issue with diversion of funds intended for children's education or family security, and having his brother as a witness will be powerful." That night, I received another text from Grace. "I hear Thomas visited you. Turning family against family now? Two can play that game." I didn't respond, but the implied threat lingered. What else could Grace do to make this situation more painful? Found out the next day when Samuel called from university, his voice tight with anger. "Mom, Someone sent an email to everyone in my department with photos of Dad and Grace and the kids. The subject line was, "The Okafor family secrets. They're calling me the leftover son." My blood ran cold. "Samuel, I'm so sorry, It's not your fault, Mom. But I'm coming home this weekend. I can't stay here right now." Similar emails had been sent to Zinli's medical school classmates. My children, already grieving their father, were now being publicly humiliated as part of Grace's campaign against me. I called Diana immediately. "This crosses a line," she said firmly. "We can petition for a harassment order and potentially use this as evidence of malicious intent in the estate case." "Can you prove Grace sent the emails?" "Not definitively, but the timing is suspicious given her threat to you. We'll add it to our filing." The next development came from an unexpected source. Michael called to tell me that Grace had approached him and other colleagues, asking them to provide statements about Thabo's unhappiness in our marriage and his intention to leave. "She offered to make it worth my while," he said. "Financially, I mean." "She's trying to buy witnesses?" "Essentially, yes. And Amara. She's not being subtle about it. Several colleagues have already agreed." "What did you tell her?" "That I wouldn't perjure myself." "But others aren't so principled. You should be prepared for people to come forward with stories about your marriage that never happened." This was a new level of manipulation. Not just hiding assets or harassing my children, but actively manufacturing evidence to strengthen her case. The Grace Delamini I was discovering was far more calculating than the emotional woman who had thrown herself over Thabo's casket. Diana advised me to document every contact, every threat, every attempt to interfere with witnesses. "We're building a pattern," she explained. "The more evidence we have of Grace's willingness to manipulate the system, the stronger our position." The forensic accountants continued their work, uncovering additional accounts and investments. One discovery particularly stood out: a life insurance policy Thabo had taken out naming Grace as the beneficiary, worth R5 million, nearly 5 times the amount of the policy naming me as beneficiary. "He set this up 3 years ago," Diana told me. "Paid for with funds from your joint account. So he used our money to provide for her future while leaving me with a fraction of that security." Exactly. And this is exactly the kind of arrangement the court can invalidate as a fraudulent transfer. 6 weeks after Thabo's funeral, we received notice that the court had scheduled a preliminary hearing. Both sides would present initial evidence, and the judge would determine how to proceed with the estate distribution. The night before the hearing, I sat with Samuel and Zinli at our dining room table. Both had temporarily returned from university to support me, their own studies disrupted by the ongoing drama. "No matter what happens tomorrow," I told them, "know that I'm fighting not just for myself, but for what your father built with us, for your future. The money he diverted should have been your inheritance." "We don't care about the money, Mom," Zinla said, taking my hand. "We care about you, about the truth." "And about justice," Samuel added, his jaw set in determination. "Dad doesn't get to betray us all and have his wishes respected. That's not how it works." Their support strengthened my resolve. Whatever happened in court, I would not face it alone. The morning of the hearing dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in a conservative navy suit, my teacher's clothes, rather than attempting to compete with Grace's designer wardrobe. Diana had advised me to project dignity and restraint. Let Grace be the emotional one. You be the rational one. The courtroom was crowded, not just with lawyers and family, but also journalists drawn by the sensational aspects of the case. Grace sat at the opposing table, immaculately dressed in a black suit that probably cost more than my monthly salary, flanked by Richard Mokoena and another attorney I didn't recognize. She didn't look at me as I entered. The judge, an older woman with stern features and penetrating eyes, called the court to order. "This is a preliminary hearing in the matter of the estate of Thabo Okafor. I understand there are competing claims on the deceased's assets. We'll hear brief presentations from both sides before determining next steps." Mokoena went first, presenting Grace's case with smooth confidence. "Your Honor, Ms. Delamini was Mr. Okafor's partner for the past 5 years. They have 2 children together, They shared property, finances, and a life. While we acknowledge that Mr. Okafor remained legally married to Mrs. Okafor, the reality of his life was with Ms. Dlamini. The financial arrangements he made reflect his intentions and commitments. He presented documents showing Grace as the beneficiary of various accounts and policies, the joint owner of properties, the mother of Thabo's minor children who required support. Mr. Okafor clearly intended to provide for Ms. Dlamini and their children. To override his wishes would be to disrespect his autonomy and intentions. When Diana rose to present our case, I felt a surge of nervous energy. So much depended on this initial presentation. "Your Honor," she began, "this case is not about competing romantic relationships or emotional claims. It is about the systematic diversion of marital assets accumulated over a 23-year marriage. It is about fraud." She methodically laid out the evidence we had gathered. The email correspondence showing Thabo's deliberate attempts to hide assets. The forensic accounting tracing marital funds to Grace's accounts. Thomas's statement about the misuse of family inheritance. Mrs. Okafor supported Mr. Okafor throughout his career, raised their children, and contributed to the accumulation of their marital property. South African law is clear that she is entitled to an equitable share of these assets, regardless of Mr. Okafor's extramarital relationship or intentions to divorce. Diana then revealed our strongest evidence, the emails showing Thabo was planning to divorce me, with clear instructions to his attorney to minimize my claims. This demonstrates that Mr. Okafor himself recognized these assets should have been part of a divorce settlement. By diverting them beforehand, he attempted to circumvent the law and deprive Mrs. Okafor of her rightful share. The judge listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When both presentations concluded, she sat back, considering. "This is clearly a complex matter requiring thorough investigation," she finally said. "I am ordering a complete freeze on all disputed assets pending resolution. I am also ordering a full forensic accounting of all finances associated with Mr. Okafor, to be completed within 60 days. She looked directly at Grace. "Ms. Dlamini, while I understand your relationship with the deceased and your position as mother to his minor children, the evidence of asset diversion is concerning. This court takes a dim view of attempts to circumvent marital property laws." Then she turned to me. "Mrs. Okafor, I acknowledge your 23-year marriage and legal status. However, the reality of Mr. Okafor's other family cannot be ignored, particularly the needs of his minor children who bear no responsibility for their parents' choices." She set a trial date for 3 months later, ordering both sides to refrain from disposing of any assets or engaging in harassment in the meantime. As we left the courtroom, I felt cautiously optimistic. The judge had acknowledged the strength of our evidence while making it clear that Grace's children would not be left without support, a balance I could accept. Diana was pleased. This went as well as we could have hoped. The judge sees the core issue, fraudulent transfer, and isn't being distracted by the emotional aspects. In the courthouse corridor, I came face to face with Grace. For a moment, we stood looking at each other. Two women bound together by the same man, by secrets and lies, by a future neither of us had anticipated. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "No," I agreed, "but the truth is coming out piece by piece. Can you live with that? Can you?" She countered. "Every revelation tarnishes your perfect husband's memory a little more. Every court filing exposes your humiliation to more people. Are you sure it's worth it?" "Justice is always worth it," I said. "For me, for my children, and yes, even for yours." She studied me for a long moment, something like reluctant respect flickering in her eyes. "You're not what I expected, Amara Okafor." "I'm not what Thabo expected either," I replied. That was always his mistake. The weeks following the preliminary hearing brought a strange new rhythm to my life. Each day I taught my mathematics classes, maintaining the professional facade my students and colleagues knew. Each evening I worked with Diana and the forensic accountants, piecing together more of Thabo's financial maze. Each night, I lay awake wondering what new revelation the next day would bring. The stress took its toll. I lost weight. Dark circles formed under my eyes, and I found myself jumping at unexpected sounds, bracing for the next attack. Samuel and Zinley had returned to university with reluctance, their own studies affected by the ongoing turmoil. I insisted they focus on their education. It was what I had fought for all along, what I continued to fight for now. 2 months after the hearing, Diana called with disturbing news. "Grace's team has filed a new motion," she said, her voice tight with concern. "They're claiming you knew about Grace all along and tacitly consented to the arrangement. That's absurd. I had no idea until the funeral. They've produced witnesses, 3 of Thabo's colleagues who claim you met Grace at company functions and were cordial, suggesting you had an understanding." I racked my brain, trying to remember every company event I had attended with Thabo over the years. There had been dozens: holiday parties, retirement celebrations, award dinners. Could Grace have been at some of them? Could we have been introduced without my realizing her significance? Diana, if I ever met her before the funeral, it was in passing as one of Thabo's colleagues. I certainly never knew she was his mistress. "I believe you," Diana assured me. "But we need to counter these claims directly. Can you think of anyone who would testify to your shock at the funeral, your genuine surprise when Grace revealed herself?" I thought immediately of the funeral director, the minister who had officiated, countless church members who had witnessed my stunned reaction. We began collecting statements, building our defense against this new attack. The strategy became clear. Grace was attempting to undermine my position as the wronged wife, to suggest I had been complicit in Thabo's double life. If the judge believed I had known and accepted the arrangement, my moral claim would be weakened, as would my legal position regarding the diverted assets. As we prepared our response, another blow came from an unexpected direction. The principal of my school called me into her office one afternoon. "Amara," she said gently, "I've received some concerning communications about you." "What kind of communications?" She slid a folder across her desk. Inside were printouts of emails sent to the school board, the district superintendent, and several parent representatives. The emails contained vague allegations about my moral character, unstable behavior, and vendetta against an innocent family. All were anonymous, but the intent was clear: to damage my professional reputation and possibly my career. "These are completely unfounded," I said, my voice shaking with anger. "This is harassment connected to my husband's estate case." "I know," the principal said, surprising me. "I followed the case in the news, and I know you. These accusations are inconsistent with the dedicated teacher I've worked with for 18 years. But I wanted you to be aware they're circulating." "Thank you," I said, relieved to have her support, but shaken by this new front in Grace's campaign against me. That evening, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. "Mrs. Okafor?" a male voice asked. "Yes, who's calling?" "My name is David Nkosi. I'm a private investigator hired by Richard Mokowina." My pulse quickened. "Why are you calling me?" "Because I'm uncomfortable with what they've asked me to do." He paused. "I've been instructed to follow you, document your movements, look for anything that might be used to question your character or stability. They specifically asked me to focus on any male friends or relationships." "Why are you telling me this?" "I have professional ethics, Mrs. Okafor. I don't mind standard background investigations, but manufacturing evidence to smear someone in an estate case crosses a line. I wanted you to know what they're planning." After thanking him for the warning, I immediately called Diana. "This is escalating beyond normal legal tactics," she said grimly. "They're desperate, which tells me our case is stronger than they're admitting publicly. But Amara, you need to be extremely careful. Assume you're being watched, that your phone might be monitored, that anything you say or do could be twisted." The warning cast a shadow over my daily life. I found myself checking for unfamiliar cars on my street, hesitating before speaking on the phone, second-guessing ordinary interactions. The psychological toll was exactly what Grace wanted: to wear me down, to make me willing to settle for less just to end the nightmare. But for every attack, I found unexpected support. Thomas continued to stand by me, providing additional documentation about family funds Thabo had misappropriated. Michael and several other colleagues refused Grace's offers to testify against me, some even coming forward to contradict her claims. My school community rallied around me, the principal publicly dismissing the anonymous allegations as baseless attempts to harass a valued educator. Most surprisingly, Lerato, Thabo's former assistant, provided a sworn statement that she had facilitated Thabo's deception for years, scheduling his business trips to coincide with time spent with Grace, diverting company resources to support his double life, even purchasing gifts for both Grace and me that Thabo claimed to have selected personally. "He made me complicit," she told me when I called to thank her for coming forward. I justified it by telling myself I was just doing my job, that it wasn't my place to judge. But watching what you're going through now, I can't stay silent anymore. The forensic accounting was completed just before the 60-day deadline set by the judge. The results were more damning than even we had anticipated. Over 5 years, Thabo had diverted approximately R21 million, more than $1.2 million USD, from our marital assets to accounts benefiting Grace and their children. This included the Santon property valued at R4.2 million, the Coastal House valued at R3.1 million, investment accounts totaling R8.4 million, life insurance policies worth R5 million, luxury items, cars, jewelry, artwork worth over R500,000 all had been purchased with funds from our joint accounts. Thabo's salary and bonuses, or family money that should have benefited our children. The evidence of systematic financial fraud was overwhelming. "This report gives us a very strong position," Diana said during our preparation for the upcoming trial. "South African law allows the court to void transactions intended to defraud a spouse, even after the death of the party who committed the fraud." "What about Grace's children?" I asked. "I don't want them to suffer for their parents' choices. The court will likely set aside some portion of the estate for their support, but the bulk of the fraudulently transferred assets should return to the marital estate." 2 weeks before the trial was scheduled to begin, I was awakened at 2 a.m. by insistent knocking at my front door. Through the peephole, I saw Thomas, his face tight with worry. "What's happened?" I asked as I let him in. "Grace has taken the children and disappeared," he said. "My contact at the bank says she withdrew large sums from several accounts yesterday, despite the court freeze." "How is that possible?" "Accounts we didn't know about, presumably. The police are involved, but I thought you should know immediately." The implications were serious. By violating the court order and fleeing with the children, Grace had potentially committed multiple crimes. But she had also thrown our case into uncertainty. How could we proceed with the trial if one party had absconded? I called Diana, who immediately began working to address the new development. She filed emergency motions informing the court of Grace's actions, requesting an immediate hearing, and initiating procedures to freeze additional accounts that might be linked to her. The judge ordered an emergency session the following day. I arrived at the courthouse to find a media circus. The story of the fleeing mistress had captured public attention, transforming our private tragedy into a sensational news item. "Mrs. Okafor will not be making statements at this time," Diana told the reporters as we pushed through the crowd. "We are focused on legal proceedings and ask for privacy during this difficult period." Inside, the courtroom atmosphere was tense. Richard Mokoena was present, claiming ignorance of Grace's plans and attempting to distance himself from her actions. The judge was visibly displeased. "Mr. Mokoena, your client has violated multiple court orders and potentially committed several criminal offenses," she stated firmly. "This court takes such actions very seriously." "Your Honor, I had no knowledge of Ms. Dlamini's intentions," Mokoena insisted. "I have attempted to contact her without success. Regardless of your knowledge, this development significantly impacts these proceedings." The judge turned to Diana. "Ms. Naidu, what is your client seeking at this juncture?" Diana rose. "Your Honor, we request immediate receivership of all known assets pending trial, including properties and accounts previously controlled by Ms. Dlamini. We also request that the court recognize Ms. Dlamini's actions as abandonment of her claims and proceed with distribution. Based on the evidence already presented, the judge considered for a moment. I am granting temporary receivership. However, I cannot summarily dismiss Ms. Dlamini's claims, particularly as they relate to her minor children, without due process. I am adjourning the trial for 30 days to allow authorities to locate Ms. Dlamini and the children." While not everything we had hoped for, the ruling was a significant step forward. A court-appointed receiver would now control all assets, preventing further dissipation. and Grace's flight had severely damaged her credibility with the court. As we left the courthouse, Thomas approached with his phone in hand. "Amara, you need to see this. It just posted on Grace's Instagram account." I looked at the screen to see a photo of Grace with both children on what appeared to be a beach, with palm trees and turquoise water in the background. The caption read, "When the system fails to protect the vulnerable, a mother must make impossible choices. Truth, justice, fighting for my children." "She's playing the victim," I said, handing the phone back to Thomas, making it seem like she fled to protect her children rather than to avoid justice. "The geotag shows the Seychelles," Thomas noted. "No extradition treaty with South Africa." Diana immediately forwarded the post to the authorities handling the case. "This confirms she left the country willfully, in violation of court orders. It strengthens our position." The next week brought another revelation. Bank records obtained by the court-appointed receiver showed that Grace had withdrawn over R3 million from previously unknown accounts in the days before her disappearance. She had been planning this move for some time, perhaps from the moment the forensic accounting began revealing the full extent of the fraud. "She knew she was going to lose in court," Diana explained. "The evidence was too strong, so she took what she could and ran." "What happens now?" I asked. "Do we just wait for her to be found?" "We continue building our case. Her flight doesn't mean the proceedings stop. It actually strengthens our position. And we request that the court move forward after the 30-day period, regardless of whether she's located." Throughout this period, I maintained my teaching schedule, finding solace in the ordered world of mathematics, in the bright minds of my students who knew nothing of the chaos in my personal life. In the classroom, I was still Mrs. Okafor, respected educator, not the humiliated widow from the tabloid headlines. One afternoon, I returned home to find an unmarked envelope in my mailbox. Inside was a handwritten note in unfamiliar handwriting. "They are in Mahé, Seychelles, Beauvallon Beach area, villa rented under the name Thabo Okafor Jr. She has plans to move to Dubai next month. She doesn't know I'm telling you this." There was no signature, but I suspected it came from someone in Grace's inner circle who had turned against her. I immediately forwarded the information to Diana, who passed it to the authorities. A week later, international news reported that Grace and the children had been located in the Seychelles by Interpol. While there was no formal extradition process, diplomatic pressure was being applied to return them to South Africa to face the court proceedings. The day before the adjourned trial was scheduled to resume, I received a call from a number with an international dialing code. Amara. It was Grace's voice, sounding tired and defeated. "We need to talk, directly, no lawyers." "Why should I agree to that after everything you've done?" "Because I have a proposition that could end this for everyone. For the children's sake, yours and mine." Despite my better judgment, I agreed to hear her out. She proposed a video call later that evening. When it would be night in the Seychelles, I informed Diana, who strongly advised against any direct communication with Grace. "This could be a trap, an attempt to get you to say something that could be used against you." "I understand the risks," I said, "but I need to hear what she's proposing. I'll record the call and share it with you immediately." That night, I sat at my dining room table as my laptop connected to the video call. Grace appeared on screen, looking less polished than I had ever seen her, her hair pulled back simply, minimal makeup, wearing a plain t-shirt rather than her usual designer clothes. "Thank you for agreeing to talk," she said, her voice subdued. "I'm listening." She took a deep breath. "I've been following the case from here. I know about the forensic accounting report, about the evidence of fraud. I know I would likely lose in court. Then why run? Why take the children and flee the country? Fear," she admitted. "Fear of losing everything, of having nothing to show for 5 years with Thabo. Fear of my children growing up without their father's legacy. So what are you proposing now?" "A settlement. Outside of court. I'll return to South Africa voluntarily if you agree to certain terms." "What terms?" "I keep the Santon house for the children and myself. I receive half of the life insurance policy Thabo took out in my name, R2.5 million instead of the full R5 million. I get a trust fund of R1 million for each child's education. You get everything else, the coastal property, the investment accounts, the remaining assets. I considered her offer. It was far more reasonable than I had expected, giving me control of approximately 75% of the disputed assets rather than the 50% she had initially demanded. Why should I agree to this rather than letting the court decide? Because it gives certainty to both of us. The court case could drag on for years, with appeals and motions. The lawyers will take more and more in fees. The children, all the children, will suffer through prolonged conflict. Her reasoning made sense, but I remained suspicious. And if I agree, I'll return to South Africa immediately with the children. I'll withdraw all claims beyond what we've agreed to. I'll make a public statement acknowledging my violation of court orders and accepting responsibility. I need to discuss this with my attorney. I understand. But please, Amara, consider what's best for everyone now, not just what's legally possible. We've all lost enough already. After the call ended, I forwarded the recording to Diana and called to discuss Grace's proposal. She was cautiously optimistic. It's actually a reasonable settlement, better than many we see in contentious divorce cases, she admitted. And she's right about the potential for years of litigation. But we'd need ironclad guarantees, court approval of any agreement, and immediate return of the children to South Africa. We worked through the night drafting a counter-proposal that accepted the general framework of Grace's offer with additional protections. The settlement would be subject to court approval. Grace would face consequences for violating the asset freeze, and all remaining funds she had taken would be returned to the estate. The next morning, I sent the proposal to Grace. Her response came within hours. She agreed to our terms with minor adjustments. 2 days later, international news reported that Grace Dlamini and her children had boarded a flight from the Seychelles back to South Africa, accompanied by Interpol officers. Upon landing, she was taken into custody pending a court appearance for violating the asset freeze orders. The judge approved our settlement agreement, expressing relief that the matter could be resolved without further litigation. Grace made a brief public apology for her actions before being released on bail, the criminal charges reduced in light of the settlement. In the end, I received the family home in Parkhurst, the coastal property investment accounts, totaling R$6.2 million, my original life insurance benefit of R$1 million, various personal assets and luxury items. Thabo had purchased. Grace received the Santon house, R$2.5 million from her life. Insurance policy trust funds of R$1 million for each child, certain. Personal items and jewelry Thabo had given her. It wasn't perfect. Justice. Grace kept assets purchased with marital funds, and the public humiliation could never be undone. But it was a resolution that allowed me to move forward, to secure my future and my children's inheritance. Most importantly, it brought an end to the nightmare that had begun at Thabo's funeral, when another woman had cried louder than me and set in motion the unraveling of 23 years of lies. The weeks following the settlement brought a strange new calm to my life. The media attention gradually faded as newer scandals captured public interest. The court formally closed Thabo's estate case, distributing assets according to our agreement. Grace and her children moved into the Santon house, maintaining a low profile after her public apology. But resolution didn't mean healing. Not yet. I still had to process 23 years of marriage that had been partly built on deception, to rebuild my sense of self after discovering I had been living someone else's carefully crafted narrative. What now? Zinl asked one evening as we sat in our living room, the house quieter without Samuel, who had returned to university. What do you want to do, Mom? It was a simple question that I had no answer for. For decades, my identity had been defined by my roles: Thabo's wife, Samuel and Zinli's mother, dedicated teacher. With the children grown and Thabo gone, who was Amara Okafor now? I don't know, I admitted. I've spent so long focusing on everyone else's future that I never really planned for my own. Zinli took my hand. Then it's time to start planning. You're only 47, Mom. You could have 40 more years ahead of you. Her words sparked something in me. Not quite hope, but possibility. I was still relatively young. I had financial security thanks to the settlement. I had skills, education, experience, and for the first time in decades, I had no obligations except to myself. The next day, I called the university where I had once studied mathematics, before putting my PhD plans on hold to support Thabo's career. To my surprise, The department chair remembered me. I had been a promising student before leaving to start a family. Mrs. Okafor. "We would certainly consider your application for our doctoral program," he said. "Your teaching experience would be an asset, and we have several research areas that might interest you." I began the application process that same day, feeling a flutter of excitement I hadn't experienced in years. This was something for me, not for Thabo, not for the children, a dream deferred for too long. Diana called with news about the financial aspects of the settlement. "The transfers are complete," she reported. "The coastal property is now in your name, as are all the investment accounts. Your financial advisor has everything structured according to your instructions." "Thank you, Diana, for everything. I couldn't have done this without you." "You're stronger than you realize, Amara. Many women would have crumbled under the pressure, accepted whatever scraps were offered just to end the nightmare. You stood your ground." Her words reminded me of all I had endured. The public humiliation, the threats, the psychological warfare Grace had waged. I had withstood it all, emerging not just intact, but with a clearer vision of who I was and what I deserved. I decided to visit the coastal property that was now mine, a luxury beach, house near Durban that Thabo had purchased, with family inheritance money intended for our children's education. I had never seen it, had never even known of its existence until after his death. The drive from Johannesburg took nearly 6 hours, giving me time to reflect on the journey that had brought me here. I thought about Thabo, not the idealized husband I had believed in for decades, but the complex, flawed man he truly was. Had he loved me once before Grace? Had he loved her truly? Or had she simply been an escape, a fantasy of a different life? I would never know the answers. Thabo had taken his truth to the grave, leaving the rest of us to piece together the fragments he left behind. The beach house was beautiful, a modern 3-bedroom villa with panoramic ocean views, tastefully furnished with high-end pieces. As I walked through it, I felt strangely disconnected from the space. This house had been Thabo and Grace's secret retreat, a place where they had brought their children, created memories I knew nothing about. Standing on the balcony overlooking the Indian Ocean, I made a decision. I would not keep this house with its ghosts and secrets. I would sell it and use the proceeds to establish a scholarship fund for young women studying mathematics, creating something positive from the ashes of betrayal. Back in Johannesburg, I began the process of reclaiming my life. I redecorated my home, removing Thabo's presence from spaces where his memory felt too intrusive. I joined a support group for women dealing with late-life divorce or widowhood, finding unexpected comfort in sharing my story with others who understood the unique pain of losing a partner to betrayal or death. Through the support group, I met Namsa, a financial advisor specializing in women's financial independence. She helped me structure the settlement assets to provide long-term security while allowing me to pursue my doctoral studies without financial stress. "You're in an excellent position, Amara," she assured me after reviewing my finances. "The settlement, combined with your teacher's pension and potential academic opportunities, gives you freedom many women never achieve." Freedom. The word resonated deeply. After years of financial constraints, some real, some fabricated by Thabo to hide his diversion of funds, I had the freedom to make choices based on desire rather than necessity. One afternoon, I ran into Michael at a cafe near my school. He looked surprised to see me, then relieved when I greeted him warmly. "Amara, you look different," he said as I joined him at his table. "Good different. I feel different," I admitted, like I'm finally waking up after a very long sleep. "How are things with everything?" he asked carefully. "Settled. Legally, at least. Emotionally is another matter." I stirred my coffee. "Did you know about the beach house? About his other children?" Michael looked down. I knew about the house. He invited a few colleagues there once, told us it was an investment property. The children, I only found out after the second was born. He showed me pictures, proud as any father. "I should have told you." "Why didn't you?" "Cowardice," he admitted. "It was easier to look away, to tell myself it wasn't my business, that telling you would only cause pain." "It would have," I acknowledged. "But it would have given me back years of my life. Years I spent believing in a marriage that wasn't real. I'm sorry? Amara, truly, his apology felt genuine, one of the few honest things in this entire ordeal. I realized I didn't hate Michael for his silence. He had been caught in Thabo's web of deception too, manipulated into complicity, just as I had been manipulated into blindness. I've applied to the PhD program at WITS, I told him, changing the subject. Mathematics education research. His face brightened. That's wonderful. The dream you always talked about at university. You remember that? Of course. You were the most brilliant student in our cohort. Everyone knew you would do important work someday. His words warmed me. Someone had seen me, really seen me, when I was young and full of ambition, before I became simply Thabo's wife and the children's mother. It's not too late, I said, as much to myself as to Michael. I'm only 47. I could still have an academic career, could still contribute something meaningful. It's definitely not too late, he agreed. And Amara, for what it's worth, I always thought Thabo was a fool for not appreciating what he had in you. 3 months after the settlement, I received my acceptance to the PhD program at WITS University, with a research fellowship that would complement my teaching income. I would begin the following academic year, pursuing the dream I had deferred for so long. I celebrated the news with Zinley and Samuel, who had come home for the weekend. I'm so proud of you, Mom, Zinley said, hugging me tightly. You're showing us how to rebuild after everything falls apart. I'm still learning as I go, I admitted. Some days are harder than others. But you're doing it, Samuel insisted. Not hiding, not pretending nothing happened, but moving forward. That evening, I received an unexpected text from Grace. I heard about your PhD acceptance from Thomas. Congratulations. Thabo always said you were the smartest person he knew. I hope you find happiness in this new chapter. The message stunned me. After everything that had happened between us, this olive branch seemed incongruous. I considered ignoring it, but something compelled me to respond. Thank you. I hope your children are well. Her reply came quickly. They are. Adjusting. They ask about their father. Someday they'll have questions I can't answer. When that time comes, would you be willing to tell them about the man you knew, before everything went wrong? The request touched a place in me I hadn't expected. Compassion for these innocent children who would grow up with fragments of their father's memory, just as my children were now struggling with the broken image of the man they thought they knew. Yes. When they're old enough to understand, I would do that. This small exchange felt like closing a circle, acknowledging that despite everything that had divided us, Grace and I would always be connected through Thabo, through children who shared his blood, through a history neither of us could erase. As I prepared for my new academic life, I decided to face one final ghost from the past. I contacted the funeral home and arranged to have a proper headstone placed on Thabo's grave, which had remained unmarked during the legal battles. After much reflection, I chose a simple inscription: Thabo James Okafor, 1975-2024. Husband, father, complex man. May truth bring peace. It wasn't the loving tribute I might have chosen before learning of his betrayal, but neither was it bitter or vengeful. It acknowledged the complexity of the man, the fullness of his existence beyond the categories of villain or hero. The day the headstone was installed, I visited the cemetery alone. Standing before the grave, I felt not grief or anger, but a strange, quiet acceptance. I never really knew you, I said softly to the stone. And you never really knew me. Perhaps that was our greatest tragedy. I placed a single white rose on the grave, not out of lingering love, but as a symbol of the peace I was finally beginning to find. Then I walked away, toward the future I was building with my own hands. 1 year after Thabo's funeral, my life had transformed in ways I could never have imagined when I sat in that church pew, watching another woman collapse dramatically over my husband's casket. I had completed my first year of doctoral studies, excelling in advanced mathematics courses while developing my research focus on mathematics education for underprivileged students. My professors spoke of publishing opportunities, of conferences where I could present my work, of a future in academia that once seemed impossible. I had sold the beach house, using the proceeds to establish the Amara Okafor Mathematics Scholarship for young women from townships, creating a legacy that reflected my values rather than my husband's deception. The first 2 recipients had been selected. Brilliant young women who reminded me of myself at their age, full of potential and determination. My relationship with Samuel and Zinli had deepened as we navigated our shared grief and disillusionment together. They were thriving in their own studies, more resilient for having weathered the storm of their father's duplicity. We spoke more honestly now, the painful truth having washed away the polite fictions that had structured our family life before. I had even developed a cautious, distant civility with Grace. We were not friends, could never be friends, but we had reached a détente for the sake of the children. Twice I had seen Thabo Jr. and Amali from a distance at school events where Thomas was present. They were beautiful children, innocent of their parents' choices, carrying a legacy they did not yet understand. My home had become truly mine, redecorated, rearranged, filled with books and research papers and evidence of my new academic life. I had converted Thabo's study into a home office for myself, exorcising his ghost from the space where he had planned his deceptions. Most importantly, I had reclaimed myself, not just the woman I had been before the betrayal, but a new version forged in the crucible of that experience, stronger, clearer, more authentically myself than I had been in decades. On the anniversary of the funeral, I invited close friends and family to my home, not to commemorate Thabo's death, but to celebrate my rebirth. Thomas came, as did several colleagues from school, friends from my support group, and fellow doctoral students who had become unexpected companions on my academic journey. As we gathered in my garden, the evening warm and fragrant with jasmine, Zinli proposed a toast. To my mother, Amara Okafor, she said, raising her glass, who taught us that it's never too late to reclaim your dreams. That the truth, however painful, is always better than comfortable lies, and that a woman's worth is not defined by a man's recognition of it. To Amara, the others echoed, glasses raised. Later, as the guests began to depart, Michael lingered, helping me gather empty plates and glasses. We had developed a friendship over the past year, cautious at first, then warming as we discovered shared interests beyond our connection to Thabo. "You've come so far," he said as we stood in the kitchen. "I don't think I've ever seen such a transformation in anyone." "It wasn't by choice," I reminded him. "Necessity is a powerful motivator." "True, but many people would have crumbled under what you endured. Instead, you built something new, something better." I considered his words. I think the secret was realizing I had been living someone else's story, Thabo's story, where I was just a supporting character. Once I understood that, I could begin writing my own. Michael nodded. "And what's the next chapter in Amara's story?" "My dissertation, of course. Teaching. The Scholarship Foundation." I paused, then added with a small smile, "And perhaps being open to possibilities I hadn't considered before." His eyes met mine, warm with understanding and something else. Possibility, potential, the hint of a future neither of us had anticipated when we stood together at Thabo's funeral a year earlier. 2 days later, I received an unexpected letter, handwritten, delivered by courier with no return address. I recognized the handwriting immediately, Thabo's. The letter had been left with his attorney, with instructions to deliver it to me 1 year after his death. As I opened it with trembling hands, I wondered what final words my husband had left for me, what explanation or justification he might offer from beyond the grave. "My dear Amara, if you are reading this, a year has passed since my death, and you have discovered truths I lack the courage to tell you in life. No apology can suffice for my betrayal, for the years of deception, for the pain I know you must have endured upon learning about Grace and our children. I won't insult you with excuses or explanations. The simple truth is that I was a coward, too afraid to face your disappointment, too weak to make a clean break, too selfish to consider the consequences of my actions for everyone involved. What began as a momentary weakness became a parallel life I couldn't find a way to reconcile with the one we had built together. Instead of making a choice, I tried to maintain both, convincing myself that compartmentalization was possible, that I could be two different men living two different lives. I know now how profoundly I failed you, failed our children, even failed Grace and the children I had with her by creating a foundation built on lies. None of you deserved the fallout of my moral weakness. You may wonder if I ever truly loved you. I did, Amara. Not perfectly, not faithfully, but genuinely. You were the foundation of everything I achieved. Your intelligence, your steadiness, your unwavering support made my career and our family possible. That I repaid that support with betrayal is my greatest shame. I have instructed Mokoena to provide you with information about additional accounts and investments not included in my formal estate planning. These rightfully belong to you, representing the future I promised when we married, before I allowed myself to stray from that promise. I hope that with time, you might find it possible to remember some good amid the harm I caused. More importantly, I hope you reclaim the dreams you set aside for me and for our family. The brilliant mathematician I met at university is still within you. Amara. She deserves her chance to shine, with remorse, gratitude, and enduring respect. Thabo sat with the letter for a long time, emotions washing through me in waves, anger, grief, a strange sort of closure. The additional financial information was unexpected, but ultimately unsurprising. One final deception. One final compartmentalization of our shared life. I forwarded the financial details to Diana and my financial advisor, then tucked the letter away in a drawer. Unlike the shock of discoveries in those first traumatic weeks after Thabo's death, this felt distant now, a footnote rather than a headline in the story of my life. That evening, I sat on my patio watching the sunset, reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year, from the devastated widow at the funeral to a doctoral student rebuilding her life, from financial uncertainty to security and independence, from a marriage built partly on illusion to relationships grounded in truth. The woman who had cried louder at my husband's funeral had inadvertently given me a precious gift: the truth. Painful as it was, it had freed me from a life of comfortable deception, had forced me to confront reality and find strength I never knew I possessed. As darkness fell over Johannesburg, stars appearing in the clear winter sky, I felt a profound sense of peace. The past could not be changed, but the future remained unwritten, full of possibilities I was only beginning to explore. My phone chimed with a text from Zinle. Guess what? Just got the highest mark in my medical ethics exam. Treating the whole family to dinner this weekend to celebrate. Love you, Mom. So proud of how we've all come through this year. I smiled, typing my reply. Congratulations, brilliant daughter. Can't wait to celebrate. Love you too. This was my real legacy, not Thabo's deception or Grace's dramatics. But these remarkable children I had raised, this strength I had discovered, this authentic life I was now living. At my husband's funeral, another woman had cried louder than me. And then the truth came out, setting me free in ways I could never have imagined. If you've enjoyed my story, please like this video, subscribe to my channel, and share with others who might need to hear that even the most devastating betrayals can become the foundation for a more authentic, more fulfilling life. Remember, it's never too late to reclaim your dreams, to stand in your truth, to begin again. Thank you for listening to my journey.